A UN-backed ceasefire comes into force in Yemen. Could nearly 4 years of war be coming to a close? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the ceasefire in Hudaida. It's been called a landmark deal between warring factions. At peace talks in Sweden, Houthi rebels and government forces backed by Saudi Arabia agreed to a prisoner exchange and a crucial ceasefire in Hudaida. The port city is a vital gateway for most of the country's food and medicine. Now, according to reports on the ground, the truce got off to a rocky start, but fighting died down as the ceasefire slowly took hold. And so far, it's largely held. The UN is now calling for international monitors to keep the peace in Hudaida. But could the tide of war be finally turning? U.S. senators voted last week to end U.S. support for Saudi Arabia in the conflict, citing human rights abuses and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's alleged involvement in the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Here's Hudaida Abbasi.
After nearly 4 years of war, a breakthrough. A ceasefire has been agreed to in Yemen's port city of Hudaida. The port offers a lifeline to millions of people desperately in need of food and aid. But fighting continued up until a truce came into effect on Tuesday. And there have been reports of sporadic gunfire after the midnight deadline. The UN helped to arrange the ceasefire last week between the Iran-backed Houthi rebels and the Saudi-backed government.
The UN will play a leading role in the ports, and this will facilitate humanitarian access and the flow of goods to the civilian population.
So what are the terms of the truce? Both sides must withdraw from Hudaida, which had been under Houthi control, within 21 days. International monitors will be deployed. Neutral forces will manage the ports with support from the UN. And revenues will be sent to Yemen's central bank. During the talks in Sweden, the Houthis and government forces also agreed on a prisoner swap involving around 16,000 people. This is scheduled to take place next month. People in Hudaida say they're hopeful.
We are optimistic for the agreement, and hopefully it will be a deal for peace. And the whole Yemeni people are optimistic and hopeful that the war will stop.
The UN says before the war, Yemen was the poorest country in the Arab world, and now it's on the verge of collapse. The last official death toll stands at 10,000, but recent estimates suggest it could be 6 times higher. And the UN has warned around 22 million Yemenis are on the brink of starvation. There's now more pressure on Saudi Arabia and its allies to end their campaign in Yemen. The US Senate passed a resolution last week to end American military support for the Saudi-led coalition.
The United States has said through the Senate that our support for the Saudi-led coalition is no longer open-ended.
So, can this shaky ceasefire in Hudaida hold? And could it be the first step towards the end of the war in Yemen? Hudaida Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
Well, let's broaden out the discussion, and joining me now from Sana'a is pro-Houthi journalist Hussein al-Bukaiti. From Riyadh, we have Saudi and Gulf Affairs expert Mohammed al-Kubayban. And in the Swedish city of Gothenburg is Afra Nasser. She's a journalist and non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thanks all so much for joining us. Okay, Hussein, I'd like to begin with you in Yemen. Earlier, you were citing almost immediate violations of the ceasefire, but we're hearing now Hudaida is largely peaceful. Do you feel that is a precarious peace, or will this hold?
I think the ceasefire now is still holding, despite the fact that the Saudi fighter jet and drones still over the sky of Hudaida. But we have hope that this ceasefire will continue because I believe one of the main reasons for this ceasefire to be held from Saudi Arabia is because the pressure on Saudi Arabia and on the Crown Prince, especially after the brutal killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and we have seen the Senate has a resolution like to stop all military support to Saudi Arabia, and maybe the Congress can take the next step. And I believe if this pressure will keep on Saudi Arabia, then we will see that the ceasefire will hold, and it will help Yemenis to implement it in other areas across Yemen.
Okay. Afra, do you feel that sense of optimism is justified given the U.S. actions that are starting to take hold against Saudi Arabia? We can't say they actually are. This is a congressional move, but nothing has actually been done. But should he be so encouraged?
It's so delightful to hear Al-Bukhaiti speaking that he's hopeful, especially that he's in Sana'a and he's very close to the Houthi circle. I believe that there is a collective willingness to make this ceasefire last for as long as possible. Beside the reasoning that Al-Bukhaiti provided, that there is a global international pressure on Saudi Arabia, following especially the killing of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. I believe the Saudi-led coalition believe that one of its best PR work today or available is to find an end to the war in Yemen. But at the same time, the Hudaida battle represent a driving force for why the peace talk and this ceasefire is likely to succeed, because we do understand, and the international community understand, how the importance of the Hudaida port being damaged or stopped, or if anything happens to this port, will lead to a catastrophe. So there is a willingness from the international community to prevent a looming famine that the world has never seen in generations unfolding in Yemen.
Okay. Mohammed, is Saudi feeling the international pressure?
Good evening to you again and your guest. There is truly there is no kind of pressure regarding whatever Hussein talked about or the other panel talked about. The pressure is we are feeling sorry for the humanitarian case. That's what is the real pressure. That's what I think the pressure is as a number one. And then the other thing is, let's give the peace a chance to see how those rebels will act based on. The third thing, I don't think so that as the other panel saying, the pressure for regarding the Khashoggi case or the Congress announcement. No, I think so that the international community took it as a serious, and with the let's say the movement in the ground forward, almost I could say about 5 to 7 kilometers from the port. I think that what drives Houthis and to come and sit back in Stockholm. Those are what we should, I mean, this is what I think is the main thing. But the bottom line, let's move forward and see what will happen. Last night, being announced the termination of shooting, and we will see what will coming next. General Patrick should be coming soon. We will see who gonna stick to the agreement back in Stockholm. So to my point, let's forget about the past and move forward for the disaster case back in Yemen.
Great. Then, Mohammed, let me ask you quickly. I understand it is a complex question, but I'm just going to ask you to, if you can, outline the ideal resolution for this conflict from the Saudi perspective.
First of all, ma'am, this is, I could say it's a Yemeni conflict. But the bottom line that we have to understand, the Yemenis should solve their problems by themselves. The big deal or the big issues for the Saudis is will terminate the intervene from Iran toward Yemen and try to exploit their ethics or their sects against the area. So what we are really looking for, Hussein, please, Hussein, the difficulty I can hear, Andrea, so let's not cut, please, Hussein. And so the Saudis are looking for settlement. We are really looking for settlement. Houthis is a part of Yemen. We just cannot isolate them. They're almost 5%. They're Muslims too. But basically, we saw that the intervention of Iran in the other capitals, Baghdad and Damascus and Beirut, it has become a real critical. So that's why the Saudis and their coalitions end up helping the Yemenis, and also it's by request by Mr. Hadi. So the coalition never intervene until they're being requested. So I'm coming up. Bottom lines, we need the Yemenis to sit in the table and to throw the Iranian thing. We will push for the peace and get together as a neighbor country.
Okay, Hussein, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, when he called it is a Yemeni conflict, if it was a Yemeni conflict, why they call it the Saudi-led coalition war on Yemen? And if it was not a Saudi conflict, if the Saudi has not to do with it, why we have many time talks in Geneva, twice in Kuwait, twice, and only this one that we for the first time have a real ceasefire. This is because of the pressure from the United States on Saudi Arabia, and especially on the Crown Prince. And when they keep actually talking about Iran, of course, maybe Iran has intervened in Iraq because they have border with Iraq. They have maybe a good relation with Syria and with Bashar al-Assad. But in Yemen, you have a total blockade in Yemen. There is no Iranian fighter jet attacking the so-called Hadi forces. It's all under the attack of the Saudi-led coalition war. And to be honest, I mean, it's really strange that you come to fight Iran while Iran is just in front of you in the Persian Gulf. United Arab Emirates is one of the main part of this so-called Saudi-led coalition war on Yemen. They claim that Iran is occupying 3 islands. Is it better for them to go and liberate their island than coming to Yemen to fight Iran on suspicion that the Iran present in Yemen? And to be honest, just 3.5 years of blockade in Yemen. I mean, it's hard to get food and medicine into Yemen. And all airport and port are controlled by the Saudi-led coalition. All land crossing is controlled as well by them. How can Iran smuggle this type of weapons? It's just they try to make Iran in this war in Yemen. They want to make it a conflict between Sunni, Shi'i, between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And this is all false and all wrong.
Okay, let me get Afra back into the debate here. I mean, Afra, Mohammed says it is a Yemeni conflict, but we know the regional players, Saudi and Iran in particular, loom very large over this conflict, and no one can really deny that they are fighting a proxy war on Yemeni territory. Will they eventually have to come to the table, those regional players, to work out this agreement, or can it be completely solved by Yemeni parties?
You know, there is an outsider reading to the situation in Yemen, and there is also a local reading. For almost all Yemenis understand that in mid-2014, Houthi group takeover of Sana'a and the attempted coup against President Hadi back then represented waging a war against Hadi. And then in March 2015, Saudi Arabia waged a war against all Yemenis. So you have many layers of this conflict. But now it's not time to, point fingers and blame who started the war. Now we have a pivotal moment where especially Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates are forced to believe in diplomacy. And to make diplomacy first is very, very important. And for them to understand that they cannot end this conflict in military means alone cannot end the conflict. They have to talk and discuss and have these talks especially that the warring parties promised to meet again in end of January. We have to focus on that. We have to focus in bringing the Saudis and the Emiratis and Yemeni government and the Houthis to come up with a new political road that could save millions of Yemenis from the famine, and also find some stability for Saudi Arabia, for Yemenis. We don't want to see any of these rockets flying from Yemen to Saudi, or the daily bombardment of Saudi-led coalition that did not leave anything moving inside Yemen. Schools, hospitals, funerals, and the list goes on. So we have to take this pivotal moment where our neighbors are starting to realize and appreciate talking instead of bombing.
Okay. Mohammed, I'd like to get your thoughts on what you've heard. And I mean, can you really insist that this is just a Yemeni conflict?
Let me just answer back, Hussein. Hussein is trying to throw a point where I think, with my respect to Hussein, it's a shallow thinking. I'm sorry to say this, but this is the reality. Now, if we're not trying to, or we're trying to avoid or trying to ignore what the Iranians are doing, so Hussein, please get back and read your books very carefully. Regarding the other panel talking about not to use the bombing and not to use the force to remove the Houthis, well, we saw what the Houthis were trying to do. First, they fired the long weapons toward the Saudis. They threatened the Saudis' border. They threatened the Holy Kaaba. Guess what? 1.5 billion people are coming towards Saudi to perform Hajj and Umrah, and they are being threatened by the Houthis. So what do you expect? The Saudis will sit down and watch? No, I don't think so. Getting back again to your point, Andrea, yes, I still consider this is a conflict that the Houthis trying to take over the power and be as the arms for the Iranians, and the Saudis or the Emirates or the coalition never intervene unless the Houthis almost gonna kill Mr. Hadi's. And again, I don't want to repeat what's been repeating last 3 years, but the 2216, I think it's clear the point that the Saudis or the coalition has the right to go and intervene and help the Yemenis get back Mr. Hadi in power. As simple as this. Why we're making it difficult?
Afra, very quickly, I saw you had something to intervene with. Do go ahead quickly if you can.
I just mentioned the bombing of and the violation committed by Houthis, not only towards Saudi Arabia and Saudi borders, but even inside Yemen. All warring parties have committed horrific war crimes in the course of this conflict. Now, I think it's a waste of time to repeat and blaming each other. Now, what is important is to understand that the only way to end this conflict is through political means. Military operations alone cannot do that.
Okay, I want to ask Hussein, since you are optimistic, given the deal in Hudaida, tell us what common ground the parties in this conflict have to work off of. And I'm talking the Saudis, the Emiratis, the forces on the ground in Yemen, as well as the Houthis and Iran.
I think we cannot take Iran into any future negotiation because, I mean, we see that Iran maybe it does in the media support Ansarullah the Houthi, but it has no military existent in Yemen. And the main, I think that we can solve or stop this war on Yemen is, first of all, the Yemeni party has to meet each other. This is what they have done in what they did in Sweden. And then the Houthis have to sit down with Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. The main obstacle for not stopping this war is just the Saudi and United Arab Emirates keep denying that they are part of this war. And we've seen the claim that Hadi has requested the Saudi coalition. This is as well a big lie, because Hadi has come in Abu Dhabi TV, I believe 3 years ago, and he said clearly in the interview that I didn't know about the war only when I was in Al-Mahra, which is near Oman border, when he fled from Aden. And then he said, we heard about it in the news. I didn't know that they will intervene. I asked them before, is there going to be any intervention? They said no. So, I mean, we have to get our fact right, especially the guest in Riyadh. When he keeps saying a coup is a coup, I mean, Sisi is a coup, and now is in coalition with Saudi and United Arab Emirates to fight a coup in Yemen. I mean, it doesn't matter what the Houthi did in 2014. Is it a revolution or a coup? In Yemen, we have many problems for the last 40 years. Most of Yemeni president, either in north or south, has been downfalled like by assassination or by a coup. But we have never ever had this so horrific situation. The largest cholera outbreak in Yemen. One child died every 10 minutes. This is because there was an outside intervention, a blockade that have killed 250,000 Yemeni and 16,000 killed by the Saudi-led coalition direct airstrike. It's still, I mean, upsetting me when some people still try to put the blame on other country. The Sweden agreement was good, but it actually there is one bad like thing about it is they have linked the humanitarian situation and the flow with humanitarian aid with military and security situation in Hudaida. They should actually has left it the humanitarian alone to focus on it to save millions of Yemeni first, because it is a crime what's done to Yemenis.
Okay, Mohammed, quick final words.
Yeah, final word is, Andrea, now you've heard to Mr. Hussein what he was saying. Exactly, this is what I'm saying. This is their mindset. That's the way how they think. They're just only thinking shallow. They're only trying to blame what's happening in Yemen. That's from the coalition. Hussein, please, let's stop this ugly music.
Here in Yemen, we are allowed to think and to say what we want, not like in Saudi Arabia.
This is exactly because if you and your mindset and your leaders, if you get back and watch what King Salman Center for Humanitarian Aid, what they did to Yemen, I think that's one answer. But trying to and get back to the history, we knew what you were doing in Yemen.
I know what they did to Khashoggi, and they denied before. How can you believe them now?
For the sixth. Hussein, will you keep quiet, please? I never interrupt. Wallahi, I have a difficulty to hear Andrea. How about yourself? Then let's not talk about past. Be pessimistic. Let's think forward and listen to her point. Her point, Andrea, was talking about the common work. Let's move forward. Let's terminate fire, cease fire, wait for the other delegations common ground, and move forward. Yemen are starving. Yemen people are suffering, and you guys are sitting behind the shields and firing weapons to the civilians. I didn't think so. We can cooperate with such a mind
the Saudi-led coalition war and blockade.
Okay, I'm going to have to leave it there, gentlemen. I apologize, but unfortunately the clock is against us as always. I'd like to thank all three of our panelists so much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Still to come on the Newsmakers, will Donald Trump shut down the U.S. government this week if Democrats don't fund his wall? And is North Korea secretly operating in African countries despite sanctions? Well, it could be a very unhappy holiday season for hundreds of thousands of U.S. federal employees. President Donald Trump is threatening a government shutdown, stepping up pressure on Democrats to fund his wall on the U.S.-Mexico border or else. A shutdown, which is rare, would affect large government departments, including Homeland Security, Interior, Agriculture, State, and Justice, even national parks. It could also cost the government billions of dollars. So will the White House and Congress find a way to prevent a shutdown, or will it be used as a weapon to force funding for the wall? Natalie Pohonen reports.
I would build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me, believe me. And I'll build them very inexpensively. I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words.
That was candidate Donald Trump. President Trump continues to beat the same drum. He's threatening to partially shut down the government if he doesn't get enough money to fund part of the wall.
We disagree. I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs pouring into our countries.
The president needs Democrats' votes, but they aren't buying his sales pitch.
He does not have the votes in the House to pass whatever his agenda is with that wall in it.
Trump wants $5 billion for his wall included in spending bills to fund about a quarter of the government. The Democrats are offering $1.6 billion to upgrade border security, but they say it can't be used to build a concrete wall. If an agreement isn't reached by Friday, there will be a partial government shutdown. About 420,000 federal employees would have to go without pay until a funding agreement is reached. That includes up to 88% of staff at the Department of Homeland Security, one of the key agencies working on border issues. In November alone, nearly 52,000 people were apprehended in the US after entering from Mexico, bypassing official border crossings. Each day, more people are trying to make that journey. The prototypes for Trump's proposed wall are on display at the border. Building it has become a rallying cry for his administration. Senior White House advisor Stephen Miller says, "We're going to do whatever is necessary to build a border wall to stop this ongoing crisis of illegal immigration." For now, whatever is necessary seems to mean a partial government shutdown. In January, the Democrats will gain control of the House of Representatives, which makes the prospect of Trump achieving one of his main policies even more distant. Natalie Pohanen, The Newsmakers.
Let's get straight to our panelists now. And from Washington, I'm joined by writer and political commentator Anousheh Hossain, and also from Washington, Republican strategist and president of the Hispanic Leadership Council, Ivan Garcia Hidalgo. Thanks both so much for joining us. Let me begin with Ivan. Would a government shutdown over funding the wall hurt U.S. security?
I don't think so, because when you shut down the government, security forces, Army, law enforcement, they're all intact. They're all stay in place. Other areas of the government are the ones shut down. So I don't think that's an issue at all. The border wall is a critical part of our security, and I think it's the right move what the president's doing. We have to include funding for the wall in this budget.
Okay. Anousheh, are you on the same page?
No, I actually completely disagree. And, you know, the U.S. security is definitely affected by this government shutdown. In fact, some of the most high-profile agencies, U.S. government agencies that would be affected include Homeland Security and the Department of Defense, not to mention the TSA agents and the border security agents during a very busy holiday period. And I think, once again, what we are seeing is just unnecessary Trump political drama and theater that has way more to do with his own ego than the security and well-being of Americans.
Okay, and Ivan, I mean, Senator Chuck Schumer called it drama, as Anousheh was saying, but he phrased it as a temper tantrum that Trump is actually throwing, and says Trump is actually using innocent government workers as hostages. Is that fair?
No, I mean, Trump, you know, Senator Schumer is probably the ideal definition of what a hypocrite is, right? Because you go back and you look at archives of his videos and speeches where he has himself had very strong positions on immigration, on border security, on building a wall, actually, and even voted for funding that. So it's very hypocritical. The left and the Democrats continue to play with the Hispanic voters and minorities across the country with fake news and false statements. And they have really no interest in finding any kind of solution to any of America's serious problems like immigration. And we see that right now. You know, the statement of the other guests saying that Homeland Security and DOD, yes, you know, obviously every agency is going to have some cuts, but not on the law enforcement capabilities, and not in a way that's going to affect our security. But you know, when we look at the situation right now, this is very, very easy. We could get a DACA, we could get TPS, we could get comprehensive immigration reform done if all we do is fund the wall. But no, the Democrats don't want to do that. They continue to play games, and it's going to hurt them at the end. I mean, personally, I think what's probably going to happen is probably a CR, a 2-week CR is going to get passed, and we're going to kick the can to January and see what happens. But you know, I have no issues with the president taking a hardline position like he's doing right now. I think Democrats need to understand that this is about national security. It's not about them getting more voters into the voter rolls.
Okay, Anousheh, I'll let you respond quickly before I need to move on to something with Yvonne. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. The number one priority and the job of lawmakers and the precedent is to keep the government open. And I think it's so selfish and detached from the larger public to be like, oh, it doesn't really matter. And I agree with the precedent, because so many government workers will not be paid over the holiday season. And that includes the Secret Service, who will be protecting and going along with the president when he takes his trip to Mar-a-Lago for a little over 2 weeks. That trip is still planned. So I think it's hilarious that people are like, oh, the government shutdown doesn't matter. And Trump is definitely throwing a temper tantrum over his border wall when he's still planning on going and vacationing in his exclusive club in Florida with Secret Service agents that may not even get paid because of his shutdown.
Yvonne, I mean,
Secret Service does get paid, by the way. So.
So sorry, Yvonne. I mean, is it not a fair point to say that it won't be fair for these government workers to not get their paychecks?
Well, they all get paid. Whenever there's been a shutdown and whenever a budget gets passed,
they do
everybody
not
gets
all
paid
get paid.
retroactively.
That's not
Get
correct.
paid, so it's
that's
the same
not
thing.
correct.
You know, so, you know, Democrats
no,
screaming and
don't.
yelling. If they really care about the worker, if they really care about the American worker, they'd sit there and pass legislation that would promote jobs and get people off of the government payrolls. That's reality. I mean, you know, the Democrat and the left strategy is put everybody on welfare or have them work for the government, and you know, we'll solve the problem. And it doesn't work that way. That's not how America works. It's not how it's ever worked.
Is this supposed to be an actual
and it's not the way it's going to work
debate?
in the future. We need to secure our border. We need to make sure that we can protect our sovereign nation, our citizens.
Okay.
Ramble on, please.
And make people go through a process that's legitimate and real.
All right, Mr. Garcia Hidalgo, I'm going to have to go back to...
You know what the funny thing is, Andrea? A lot of this is that...
Go ahead, Anousheh. Finish quickly.
Sorry, continue.
Okay.
I was just going to say that a lot of lawmakers are trying to sell this to the public.
Okay.
No, continue.
No, I do need to get back to a core point, because this was a pillar of Donald Trump's campaign. Kept talking about building the wall. But just as importantly, he kept repeating that Mexico was going to pay for it. Now we're threatening a government shutdown because Congress isn't including U.S. funding, $5 billion worth, to build this wall. Yvonne, what happened to Mexico paying this bill?
Well, I said it from the beginning. It was I said it during the campaign before the president was elected, when people questioned that, and I said the simple answer: it's semantics, right? Because at the end, we're going to renegotiate NAFTA. We're going to correct tens of billions of dollars in trade deficit, and that'll be able to cover a brand new wall every single year for for perpetuity.
But that's
so
not a
that's
payment
reality.
from Mexico.
And Nancy Pelosi has actually said that it's not fair for that surplus in the new trade agreement in the USMCA to go towards the wall and not the American people. Trump negotiated this. He created this situation. He's saving us tens of billions of dollars on a trade surplus. That covers the wall. All it takes is one year, cover it, and end the story. then the surplus continues to come to the American people and the economy every single year.
Okay, but one problem is that agreement, the USMCA, US-Mexico-Canada agreement, hasn't been ratified, and a number of economists have said that the kind of revenue that it would generate still wouldn't cover the kind of costs of this wall. I know studies you're reading may say otherwise, but I mean, Anousheh, is it fair to use the proceeds from whatever new trade agreement is drafted to cover the cost?
Well, the funny thing is, and you're just like you said, Mexico was never going to pay for this wall. Mexico is never going to pay for this wall. They have said themselves that they are not going to pay for this wall. The current Mexican president has said this, and former Mexican presidents have said this. Like many things that Donald Trump promises, it's a scam. It is not real, and there is no funding for this wall, and lawmakers do not think that it's a priority to, it has nothing to do with our border security. They're making up, Stephen Miller was on the Sunday talk shows making the rounds saying that the government will absolutely shut down over funding for the border wall. And everybody knows that the U.S. government is just making up these stories, this Trump administration, about the onslaught of caravans full of migrants. But everybody knows that it's not a priority. And everything they're saying is actually the fake news they accuse the other side of.
Right.
But ever since the midterms passed, Andrea, we have not heard about where did the caravan go? Where did this caravan full of pregnant women and sick immigrants go?
It doesn't exist.
This is such a joke, and it's once again cheap.
There are
Trump
criminal element in there. There are
theater,
terrorists.
the cost of real
there are
American
MS-13
lives.
gang members. But that doesn't exist. That didn't happen.
I love how talk of this caravan
Democrats
just
live in
disappeared
this
after the Republicans
Democrats
got
live in
their
this
heads
fantasy
handed to them over
where
the
they
midterms.
think they can sit there and tell the American
I really wish I could live in the world where you live in, which is completely like delusional,
none of
not
this
full
works
facts,
and none of this is real.
Reality.
And they're going to continue to play with the Hispanic vote.
If Trump really cares, he would cancel
his
trip to Mar-a-Lago.
Let me turn.
To add more voters
You are not living in reality.
I have to
can't
turn
even have
to
a debate with you because this is a joke.
Okay, let me ask a separate question here then.
Same as your policies and your positions.
Yvonne, let me ask you. Trump has argued that he actually has the votes, though, in Congress to pass the funding. We saw Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer come back and say, no, you don't. You just don't have the numbers. Where are you coming up with this? So tell me where you stand. Are the numbers there in Congress for Trump to get his funding for this wall passed?
Yes and no. So we have the votes in the House. We don't have the votes in the Senate. In the Senate, we need 60 votes. So we need 10 Democrats, and that's not going to happen. So in reality, there's no point in passing this through the House to have it just sit there in the Senate and get voted down, which is what Pelosi was suggesting.
Didn't the Democrats just win control over the House? Wait, they have
do we have the votes? No,
in
we
the
don't
House?
have the votes.
So you're saying you have the votes now until the new Congress steps in, and then the numbers definitely won't be there. So explain how this works kind of logistically. If you do shut down the government, and this bill does not get passed with the funding for the wall, the new members of Congress take over in January. Then where do things stand? Will another government shutdown be threatened, or will Trump just the president just have to accept that he's not going to get that funding from U.S. Congress?
I don't know where this is going to go. I mean, I personally think they're going to pass a CR, a continuing resolution today, and kick it out 2 weeks, and then have the new Congress come in and work with the new Congress to try and get some kind of agreement. I don't think either side realistically wants a shutdown. Rhetoric aside, I don't think the president is looking to shut down government and keep it shut down forever. Everybody's playing politics. Schumer did it last time with DACA, and it's been done numerous times throughout previous administrations, so it's nothing new. It's a negotiating tactic that both sides uses. What's going to be the outcome? I think they're going to have to find themselves somewhere in the middle. Right now, the Democrats are offering $1.6 billion, but not for any wall construction. He wants $5 billion for the wall. I think they're going to have to meet somewhere in the middle that includes wall and security. That isn't physical, right? Like electronic or drone or or whatever.
But isn't it so funny, Andrea, that, wait, I thought Mexico was supposed to pay for this wall, but he's holding the U.S. government hostage over his border wall funding, which just proves my point that this is all a farce. And in fact, a lot of people are labeling this as shutdown light, because through the appropriations process, 75% of the U.S. Government is already funded through 2019. So it would only be certain agencies that are going to be affected. But the point is that Homeland Security, TSA agents, border security agents, Trump is trying to pin this as, like he does with everything else, and making this about national security and about the security of the country. But really, it's about his ego, because he's not going to cancel his trip to Mar-a-Lago. His Secret Service agents are not going to be paid. This is the holiday season. It's Christmas time. Everybody should be paid. Nobody should be wondering where their paycheck is going to be coming from. And the job of the president and the U.S. government is to make sure that the government keeps running. A shutdown is never okay or acceptable, no matter how partial it is.
Okay, Anusha, though, quickly, if you can comment on what...
But when Democrats shut it down, it's okay, right? But Democrats have shut down the government plenty of times. It is never an issue.
No.
Right? Because they're doing
Democrats
the right thing.
are not in power.
See, that's the hypocrisy of the left.
The Democrats are not in power.
The hypocrisy of the left
president,
is they believe.
it's a Republican Senate.
The hypocrisy of the left is they believe they are the sole owners of the truth.
Personal.
And they are the...
I'll tell you what, let's not make it personal.
Controlling
Anusha,
the
I
House,
just want
the Senate, and the White House.
Chaos, misery, and corruption.
I'd like to see,
Anusha,
Anusha,
if
you at least agree
Okay.
on Ivan's vision for where this is ultimately going. He was saying that somehow both parties will have to meet somewhere in the middle on this funding deal. Do you agree?
I agree in a normal, realistic world, but in Trump's world and Trump's America, as we are seeing with this total made-up political drama that he is creating, everything comes down to this president's ego. And your other guest just went from saying Mexico's going to pay for it to we should pay for it, and it's okay to shut down the government over it? I mean, I don't even understand. I don't even understand people who speak on behalf of this president.
Okay, Anusha, actually, I'm going to give you...
Well, I just explained it to you, so if you need me to explain it again, I'll be happy to if you don't understand, but it's going to come from the surplus.
I don't need you to say anything unless it involves at least one fact.
On the trade
deal.
Have you
uttered one fact?
If you don't understand that, there's plenty of documentation out there to help you understand.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for any further explanations. Actually, we are completely out of time for this segment of the Newsmakers. So I'd like to thank you both so much for joining us from Washington.
I reiterate our desire for more African nations to apply concrete diplomatic and economic pressure on North Korea.
Well, as the U.S. stepped up sanctions on North Korea aimed at ending its nuclear program, the East African nation of Uganda agreed to end 50 years of military cooperation with Pyongyang. But that cooperation may be continuing. In violation of sanctions, the two nations are suspected of maintaining their ties with North Korean soldiers training Ugandan government forces. And Uganda might not be alone. Also suspected of violating sanctions are Tanzania, Sudan, Zambia, and Mozambique. Well, to discuss this further, I'm joined now from Kampala, Uganda, by journalist Dickens Okello, and from Dallas, Texas, political commentator and journalist Joshua Poro. Thanks both so much for joining us. Before we actually get into this discussion, I'd like to just first establish that you both agree North Korea is working with and in Uganda, but you disagree on whether it's actually beneficial to do so. So, Dickens, let me start with you. Why does Uganda actually choose to work with North Korea in the first place?
Well, the revelations from the press or Wall Street Journal wasn't a surprising thing to me. North Korea is stated in 5 countries in Africa. But anyway, that's just Africa. But if you also look at other nations, it's happening. Though the Ugandan authority, the defense spokesperson of Uganda, he unequivocally denied it. But to me, it wasn't a surprise, because as we are talking now, there are about there are 25 embassies, in Pyongyang. We also have countries with having diplomatic ties with Pyongyang. There are about 120 something, Uganda inclusive, as per se. So it's not a surprise to me that it shouldn't have happened. No,
it's not a surprise. But why does Uganda choose to work with North Korea? Why is it having specifically North Korean soldiers come to train its troops?
Well, officially it has been denied, but the way I look at it through the backdoor sources that talk to Wall Street Journal, well, in any cooperation or in any agreement, number one thing is always the cost of something. So if what North Korea is offering to Kampala is cheaper as compared to other what comes from other nations, and also if it's free of conditions like democracy, like these other affairs, it makes it flexible, or it makes it easier for a country in sub-Saharan Africa to get in touch with Pyongyang to get those trainings. Because, well, there is a UN embargo, all right, but still, there are always many things within there. Just last week, the United Nations released a report of Uganda supporting South Sudan, taking arms and doing here and there. So I believe some of these things happen.
Joshua, I can see you laughing. Go ahead.
No, you see, that guy is my brother, and we always disagree on issues like this. Let me just take us a little bit back. Uganda's relationship with North Korea started way back in the 1970s when President Idi Amin at the time had an agreement with Pyongyang to supply, of course, his troops with weapons and also provide training. That was against the Tanzanian forces and President Museveni at the time. But also President Museveni himself, after getting into power in 1986, he traveled to Pyongyang in 1987 to meet then Kim Il-sung. And if you notice recently, he was actually awarded, in 2014, he was awarded the highest prize in North Korea, but of course he rejected it to avoid controversy. Now, the reason why I do believe Uganda is still maintaining ties with South Korea with North Korea is the corruption benefits that come with it. Look at it in this scenario. There is a UN embargo on North Korea. They are barred from dealing with countries. So Uganda itself actually did announce that they were cutting all ties with North Korea. However, the most amazing thing is they cut it at the top. At the bottom, no, they did not cut the ties with North Korea. So what does that mean? This means that Uganda at the low end continues to deal with North Korea. The monies that are used to buy weapons from North Korea are not even budgeted for. We don't know how much they spend. The money that is being spent to buy weapons from North Korea actually comes from our military budget that we don't even know how much it costs. Look at the 2016 election, for example. We had new police equipment coming in from Mombasa. We had pictures all over social media that was showing these shipments coming to Uganda. All policemen got new guns, AK-47s and the like. So definitely North Korea is providing cheap artillery for the Ugandan community. But this is what I'm trying to say. If Uganda is a signatory to the UN Charter, why can't you respect it? This is what we refer to as the rule of law and or democracy. So if somebody chooses to sign and be a part of a charter, but not respect it, then I don't think that person is the right leader. I do believe that Uganda probably might need military training or might need equipment. Why can't we do it the right way?
Okay, Joshua, just to be clear, I mean, the lack of conditions that Dickens was actually praising from North Korea, you say those really serve to foster corruption in Uganda.
Yes, absolutely. Can you imagine what would happen if a country didn't have a constitution? Can you imagine what would happen if your organization did not have the rules and regulations that govern that office? There would be a whole lot of a mess, and that's exactly what's happening right now between Uganda and North Korea. There are no conditions attached to whatever it is that we are doing, and the world is fighting against the nuclear power, and they want North Korea definitely to stop working with nuclear weapons. So I do believe that this is not the right thing to do. Uganda needs military training. Uganda needs assistance. But we are not warmongers. You see, we have soldiers everywhere in the South Sudan. We have soldiers in Central African Republic. When the war in South Sudan started, Uganda sent troops first and later came back to seek the approval of parliament. We have so many things that are happening in Uganda with disregard for the rule of law. So I think this is just a move to foster corruption in different aspects of our military. So yes, they're having training. Just if you look at some of the manuals that are being used to train them by the North Korea, we are looking at close combat and we are looking at crowd management. So my question is, why are we focusing on that? Which crowd are you planning to manage? Close combat with who? Who are you going to fight? I do believe that this is a ploy by President Museveni to stifle himself in power, just take a hold of power. He has already taken it. He's now just reinforcing his foundation so that tomorrow when Uganda decide to riot, boom.
Okay, Dickens. Let me ask you, I mean, we understand there's a history there, there's a relationship, perhaps a sense of loyalty. If I'm not mistaken, Yoweri Museveni actually said he learned basic Korean from Kim Il-sung himself. But that said, how is this relationship actually benefiting ordinary Ugandans today?
Well, what the ordinary Ugandan need is protection. Security. The ultimate thing is the security. Now, if they are giving the good training, now we don't know what kind of, we can't quantify it as per se, but Uganda is a country that has been in existence for more than 50 years, since 1962. At least we always have each and every plan that these are our defense arrangement. These are the people we need in place. These are the sorts of training we need in place. Somebody did not just dream at night or just wake up in the morning and say, here, and boom, we're going to bring this to train us. No, 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 no. Things were done, things were planned. And much of these things, they don't just come out of the blue. Much of these things are brought to Parliament, are taken to Parliament, debated in Parliament, and decided in Parliament. Even the money itself used to pay them, or the money used to buy whatever equipment, is always passed from Parliament, debated, discussed, and everybody agree. Parliament where there is opposition and there is ruling party. So I don't think the ordinary Ugandans are not going to benefit if at all they are training. They are not training these guys to go and... Uganda doesn't have a mafia group that go loot this there and there. No, we have a national army taking care of the interests, of the security interests, security and defense interests of the whole nation.
Okay.
So that's how it's going to benefit us if it's happening.
Joshua laughing again. Go ahead.
Dickens has put it very clearly. Uganda does not have a mafia group. My question is, why do we need this training? It's not necessary for us to have this kind of military training because we don't have a mafia group we are planning to go and encounter. Now, the money that Dickens is saying is used for paying these people is approved by Parliament. That's part of a military classified budget. I do not think the Parliament of Uganda would at any one point, much as it is a majority of the National Resistance Movement, which is the current ruling party, I do not think and all believe that we would at any one point pass a budget for the training of Ugandan soldiers by North Korea, and yet this has been banned by the United Nations. And Uganda did announce actually that we would be cutting ties with the North. Okay, so we had former South Korean president who came to Uganda in 2016. They actually had an agreement to start working together. President Museveni announced to cut ties with North Korea and start working with the South, but that didn't work out so well, I guess, because even in our hospitals, we have the North Koreans. In we have North Koreans. In the police, we have the North Koreans. I don't believe that this is necessary at any one bit.
Joshua Poro, we're going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank you and Dickens so much for joining us on The Newsmakers. That's all for this edition of The Newsmakers with me, Andrea Sankey. Check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. Next time, 100 days until the UK leaves the EU and the country still hasn't agreed on how. Is it time to hold a second Brexit referendum? Until then, thanks for watching. Goodbye.